In today's episode, we're going to go through describe questions. Here are a range of questions I found. So we have describe how adrenaline binds to cardiac cells. So that's more of a, of course, descriptive, but content sort of question. Again, we've described 3 other cellular functions of the cytoskeleton. Also, notice how I just read that question. I didn't read the things above it. That's part of the exam technique. In question 9a, saying describe the trend shown in figure 16.1. Describe questions can come mostly in these 2 forms. There will always be a graph, table, something like that, just like in 9a, that come up in the exam papers every year, without a doubt. And yeah, so think to yourself now, what do they all have in common other than the things I said? For example, for me, I could see that I can predict, actually, that the answers will be based on content and interpretation through graphs. So yes. Here are some other questions I also found. So, describe 2 aspects of the experimental design that the scientists would need to consider in order to produce a valid comparison of the 2 patients. Now, this is actually where you read the context, because you need to know about the how the scientists conducted the study. So yeah. Another thing is at the bottom, describe 2 other ways in which the drawing could be improved. For that specific question, I'm telling you now, bring up your notes, write down the answers whenever you see the mark scheme for that question, or like when you come across it, because the answers are so simple and just really easy to memorize. I'm just looking at that, I can see, well, you can't have shading, you can't have curly lines, it needs to be straight, you need to have a ruler, title, stuff like that. And the other question said, with reference to the diagram, describe how PBO is acting as an enzyme inhibitor. So this is kind of where you say what you see. So yes. Now, to go through a specific question. So the one about adrenaline binding to cardiac cells. How should you approach this? Well, think, how do hormones bind to cells in the first place? It does not matter whatever hormone they decide to put in the question, because the answer will still be the same. By thinking this way, you can predict the answer. So, how do hormones bind to cells in general? They bind to receptors, don't they? And where are the receptors? They're on the plasma membrane. And you just always say glycoprotein. I don't really have a reason why, like a specific reason why they want you to say glycoprotein, but I've kind of accepted it and always put glycoprotein in my answers before, so you should do the same, because it always comes up as a mark. And then this question, a lot's going on, I know, but bear with me. So this is a describe the trend. Okay, before, I'll be honest, before I understood what describe questions even meant, I used to say, for example, the graph starts at 4 weeks. And then I'd explain why, but that's not what the question wants. It just wants you to say what you see. So how should you approach this? This is the exact framework you should write down your notes and implement. State the trend. So what I mean by that is, does the graph fluctuate? Does it plateau? Say when. Where does the graph start? So 4 weeks. Where does the graph end? 40 weeks. Where does the graph peak? So we can see that's about, I want to say about 8 weeks. And then also mention about the gradient. Is the gradient steep? Is it increasing, then decreasing, increasing? Or is it just increasing and decreasing? So if we look at the mark scheme, it says no production of HCG until 4 weeks. That is answering the thing that I said about where does the graph start. Then it talks about rapid increase, high gradient, okay? Then it says about the decline, says about the peak, says about fluctuations, and it also says about it remaining the same after 19 weeks. All of those points are very vital to write. And we can see that there's always going to be a mark for use of comparative figures. So that always comes up on the mark scheme. So remember, when you say something, give like data points essentially. So say what the concentration of HCG is at the peak. And remember, you must add the units, because if you don't put the units with the number, then you won't get the mark. So remember that. And yeah, that is how you answer describe questions. Remember, as I like to always end these, the two most important exam techniques are read the question first and state all the obvious points. Now it's your go. Go find some exam questions on the topic you're learning in class and try describe questions. Try and implement these techniques you've learnt here and let me know how it goes.